All right, what we're going to do tonight, we've been looking at chapter 6 here, John 6, and we've been bringing out especially the Exodus themes that have been here. I'm going to take one more night to do this, and especially as we get toward the end, it's going to be kind of miscellaneous, doesn't sound quite right. They're in an order and everything, but we're just going to kind of finish up with this, and then we'll move on to the rest of the passage next week. So I just want to bring this out. Last week we looked at the feeding of 5,000. We looked especially at the themes from the Exodus, the Passover. We looked at the Passover last week. And notice it says here in verse 4, "And the Passover, a feast of the Jews." Remember, Israel was in a rebellious state. That they were under the curses of the law and the courses of punishment. They've been removed from the land, and now even after they return to the land, they are still under the courses of punishment, the curses of the law. They're under Gentile rule. They're under the rule of a vain religious system. The religious system of Israel has stolen away the nation, has stolen away God's things, and one of them here is the Passover. They've stolen away his feast. They've stolen away his nation. We read earlier, they've stolen away his temple, and they're using it for their own things instead of God's things. And here we have another example of that. It's the Passover of the Jews. The Jews in John especially have to do with those who are hostile to Jesus. They've taken it over. The vain religious system rules the nation of Israel. They've stolen Israel away from God. They're in the clutches of the Gentiles, and they are in the clutches of the Gentiles, and the Gentiles, of course, are ultimately in the clutches of Satan. So that's the state of the nation, and it's a feast of the Jews, and it was near. So we looked at the Passover last week, the Passover feast, the night of, and the flesh, eating of the flesh of the lamb. Then we also brought up, we're not going to mention this one this week, we're going to talk about it next week, is this bread concept, and that's really going to start kind of taking over the whole chapter here as we get a little further on. Tonight what I want to look at is this manna concept. Very important. Once they cross the Red Sea, he's going to start giving them manna, providing them manna from heaven, and he's going to provide that to them all the way till they enter into the land, which while we don't know when they cross they don't know when they cross the Red Sea, we know now is going to end up taking them some 40 years. So that's what we're going to look at now, the manna concept. And the question we want to look at here is the purpose of the Exodus. And we've dealt with this before, so I'm not going to go into the detail. We've looked at this before. This is probably the key, most important thing to understand the Old Testament scriptures. This is the key. And so it's worth doing a little bit of repetition, I think. I had another Grace pastor who said the characteristic of teaching is repetition. The most important thing in teaching is repetition. So I'm not going to be real repetitive, but I'm going to bring these things back to mind. And that's the question, what was the purpose of the Exodus? That's a very critical thing. What was God trying to do, trying to get the nation to do through that Exodus? And you're not going to find this in most teaching. You're not going to find it those who go to Sinai and thinks that's what they gave the right answer at Sinai. You're not going to find it in most of traditional teaching. And so I'm going to bring out the two things that God was trying to teach Israel during the Exodus. And we've looked at these before, so I'm not going to go in great detail, as I said, but we're going to look at that because the provision of the manna actually covers both aspects. So that's why we're going to spend some time on the manna tonight. What the Exodus is going to show them, what the provision of the manna was meant to teach Israel, is that first of all, to become the children that God intended them to be, they absolutely had to, the only way possible was to rely on the grace resident in his I Am Jehovah name. That's the only way. He gives them that name in Exodus 3. We're not going to go back there. He gives them that I am blank spot name, and now he's going to spend the whole Exodus teaching them how to fill in the blank. He gave them that name, revealed it in full through this Exodus account. That's where Israel's grace resides, the grace to make Israel into God's own holy and great nation. Now, if we want to keep the idea of rightly dividing in mind, that is not where our grace is today. Where is our grace today? Our grace today in his mystery program for the body of Christ is in Pauline grace mystery truth. In the Old Testament, in God's prophetic program with the nation of Israel, whether the Old Testament, the gospel accounts, the ministry of Peter and the 12, the source for the nation's grace was his I am Jehovah name. And of course in John 6 here, we're going to have an explosion of that name, and we'll actually mention that a little later. But in order to become the people, the nation, the children he intends them to be, the only way they're going to do it is if he does it for them. They can't do it themselves. They can't do it through the power of their own flesh. And he's going to spend this Exodus journey putting them in impossible situations. The first one he's going to deliver them from the Egyptians. Then he's going to take 2 million people to bitter waters that can't be drunk. He's going to put them in these impossible situations. He's going to take them out to the wilderness where there's no food. And he's trying to teach them the only way they're going to overcome these things is he has to do it for them. So that's the main provision here, the main purpose for the Exodus. It's not to make of them their own self-reliant nation, make themselves into something. God would have to do it for them. When we in John 6 now, he's going to multiply the bread. He's going to do this miracle with the bread, and maybe we should just go ahead and pick it up there so we can say we at least touched our feet in Romans. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm saying Romans so much tonight, but if I say Romans, just know it's John. After these things, this is John 6, verse 1. John 6, verse 1, after these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him because they saw his signs, which he did on them that were diseased. And so we have the healing concept, right? It begins, it always is introduced with this healing. Just think of, we were in Acts 3. What happened before Peter's message? There was a healing. John 5. What happened before Jesus's, what we just read in John 5, Jesus's discourse in John 5? He healed the lame man. And so you have this healing, and guess what is going to be the key I am Jehovah name in the manna account? It's going to be the I am your healer. That's at the bitter waters there. I am your healer. That's Exodus 15. Then he's going to supply them with bread, with manna. That's Exodus 16. So they go together, and he's following that order here. The Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? So he's going to carry out this miraculous sign and provide food in the wilderness. Now, this is a little different. We'll look at this at a point a little later too. But none of these people, some of these miraculous signs had to do with people who were in horrible situations, dire situations. Just think of the nobleman's son on the brink of death. Some people even think he was dead, and Jesus raised him from the dead. I don't think so, because it's when the nobleman was on the road and was met by his servants. He asked, when did the child recover? When did his son recover? And they said, the fever left him, at the time Jesus spoke this the day before. So if the fever left him, the child was still warm when he was healed, which indicates to me he was still alive, but very much at the brink of death. The lame man, he'd go to these pools, at the beginning of chapter 5, he'd go to these pools, and every day, any day could have resulted in disaster. He couldn't walk, he couldn't move around. No doubt every day was a precarious day. And they were in really precarious, dangerous, death-infiltrating circumstances. But this sign, this miraculous sign, really isn't like that, right? It's more like the first sign in Cana, the changing of the water into wine, and the superabundance there. Here, none of these people, if Jesus decided he didn't want to feed them and sent them home, none of these people, they might have got home pretty hungry, like if you had to work through lunch or something, by dinner you're pretty hungry, but I don't think any of them would have just keeled over on the way home and died of starvation. They didn't really, my point is they didn't really need the physical bread. What he's showing them and what we're going to learn in chapter 6 is they needed him. That's what they need. That's what he's trying to point them to. In their situation now, there's going to be other times, especially the believing room in the tribulation, when it will be a true need. Here, though, in John 6, it's really not a need. He's going to do this, and they don't really need the physical food, but they do need him. And we'll see how that plays out as we go through here. He has to do everything for them if they're going to be the people he created them to be. He's the supplier, the creator of bread, and being the creator of bread, he's the creator God of the universe. The Word, remember John 1, where it talked about the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word created all things? And here he's going to create bread. He's going to create and multiply the bread. We'll look at the bread concept next week. It's important to see now that this all ties into that Exodus. We see this is one of those themes we can look at. And so let's go to Exodus. Go to Exodus 12. Keep your finger in John. We're only going to be in Exodus for a couple seconds, but you might want to keep a bookmark in Exodus too, because we'll be back in there a couple times. Exodus. It's important to realize that the Israelites, they had the Passover celebration the night before, and then they had to leave Egypt quickly. And so we're not going to go through the whole history and all the details, but pick it up at chapter 12, Exodus 12, verse 39. Exodus 12, verse 39. So they're on their way out, and he's just describing here I guess we could begin at verse 38. Well, let's begin at verse 37, because there we get the number of people. Verse 37, this is Exodus 12, verse 37. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, beside children. So we have 600,000 men, and you could probably assume about 600,000 women. And then if half of them were married couples, then you might have another 600,000 children. So you could have, close to 2 million people, maybe even over 2 million if they had a couple kids. So you got a big group, mostly women and children. And he's going to take them through all these things. And here we just want to look at verse 38. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds and even much cattle. And they baked, this is the verse we're really aiming for here, and they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry. Neither had they prepared for themselves any victual and any meals. So now kind of keep that in mind. They didn't prepare any meals. God throughout this whole journey is going to prepare the meals for them. We see a great example of this if we flip over a couple pages to Exodus 15. Exodus 15, verse 27. Exodus 15, verse 27. Here, and this is right after the manna account. He's going to, excuse me, not manna. Manna's coming up in chapter 16. This is right after the bitter waters account. Look at the last part of verse 26. Verse 26, he says, I am the Lord that healeth. I am your healer. And that's what he's teaching them, how to fill in that I am name. And he's done it now with the bitter waters. And now look what he does after he heals the bitter waters so that 2 million people, mostly women and children who have gone through some very scary things, can drink, can satisfy their thirst. But now look at the next step. Now look at the next step, verse 27. And they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. So now they have a superabundance of waters. You get the idea with these numbers. God had already prepared this for them. 12 wells, the 12 tribes of Israel. Of course, there's not the 12 tribes of Israel here right now, but there will be. There is the 12 tribes of Israel here now, the 12 sons of Jacob. They haven't been formed into a nation yet, but you have the 12 wells for the 12 tribes of Israel, and you got the palm trees. You know, palm trees don't grow in 5 minutes. God's been preparing this for them for a long time. He's designed the wells there to be there. He's designed the palm trees to give them shade there. He's prepared, the point is, he's prepared for them a place in the wilderness to be refreshed and restored. And you see this over and over again. Now we fast forward 40 years. They go through this wilderness wandering, go to Joshua, and they're entered into the land. They cross the Jordan, enter into the land. Go to Joshua 5. Joshua 5, and we see another place. He has to do it for them. That's what he's trying to teach them. Now we're at the very end. He's been preparing for them. Remember, even their shoes don't wear out. He's been giving them manna to sustain them for 40 years and provided them in every other way as well. Now they've crossed the Jordan and they've entered into the land, and look what it says. Let's pick it up at verse 10. Verse 10. I guess begin at verse 9, so we kind of get the background. Joshua 5, verse 9. And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off of you, wherefore the name of the place called Gilgal unto this day. And the children of Israel encamped at Gilgal, and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month, even in the plains of Jericho. Now Jesus isn't in the plains of Jericho, but remember what's happening in John 6 is near the Passover. So you got all these things, these themes kind of bubbling up. That's why we covered that last week. But look at verse 11. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow, and the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. The point is, if it's old corn, it was already there. It was just waiting for them. God had someone else prepare the land for them, prepare a table for them in the wilderness. They're going to go and eat old corn. Corn, grains, they take at least a year. That's probably why they makes a point about the year, and here they ate it that year. They didn't have to wait a year. When the Pilgrims came to America, they brought provisions with them. Because what could they not rely on? God may not have provided a table for them, in Massachusetts. They had to bring their own provisions for the first year. because it would take some time to produce the provisions. Israel, under God here, they get taken. He prepares the place before they get there. They didn't need to bring provisions. All they needed to do was go in the land. He had prepared there already, old corn for them to eat, and eat of the fruit. Now, I don't know if fruit is, he's just referring more to grains and stuff, or fruit, he means fruit like grapes and things like that, but I actually looked this up. For a grapevine to start producing fruit takes at least 3 to 4 years. And other fruit trees take even years beyond that. The point is, they left Egypt without provisions, without a meal. Without meals, he provided for them throughout the wilderness, the whole 40 years, and now when he brings them in the land, there's a place there for them already prepared with old corn and the fruit of Canaan. He has to do it for them. If they would just rely on him to do it for them, he'll do it. He'll make them into his own great and holy nation. Now, don't try this today. You know, I saw a magic trick once, and there's big fires would come up, and the magician said, now don't any of you try this at home. You see, you can't try this today. If you try to not make any provisions for the future, not plan for your future meals or anything of that, now you may get away with that in the richest nation in the history of the world like America. But don't try that if you're in Africa or China or India. Don't try that if you've been in the before like 1900s, almost anywhere in the world. It won't work today. That's why you got to rightly divide. This was a provision for the nation of Israel to make Israel into a nation, God's own nation, God's holy and great nation, a nation that would be greater than any other nation on earth. And that requires health, wealth, and prosperity. They get spiritual blessings so they can receive the physical blessings. Don't try this today. It won't work. Today, we've been reading in our Ephesians study, it's spiritual blessings in heavenly places. That's what we need to carry out our ministry as members of the body of Christ. That's why rightly dividing is so important. You're just going to spin your wheels, and for a lot of people, it ends disastrously. So they left without any provisions, and God provided them every step of the way as they went through this. All right, God prepared everything for the wilderness journey. Of course, this provision is going to be especially important for the believing remnant going through that tribulation period. That's where it's going to be especially important. So that's the first thing they needed to learn. They needed to learn that they have to rely solely on Him. They have to do that by falling on the grace, accessing the grace resident in His I Am Jehovah name. For the nation of Israel, they needed to take that I Am name and fill in the blank with whatever they needed. They grumbled about the bitter waters. What did Moses do? Moses did, "Oh Lord," all caps, "I am, oh I am, we need some water." And the Lord said, pick up a tree, throw it in the water, and He healed the waters. That's what He's trying to get them to do through the Exodus account. If they're going to be the people He created them to be, He'd have to do it for them. They can't do it on their own. They can't do it through their own power. The second thing He's teaching them in the Exodus account is that they must never, ever, 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 ever relate to Him on the basis of a law system according to the flesh, whereby the relationship was based on them making themselves into God's holy and great nation. It won't work. They can't do it. It's like coming to 2 million people, thirsty people coming to a pool of poisonous water. It won't work. You'll just die in the wilderness. And of course, that's basically what the nation is going to do over the next 1,500 years. And They never, don't enter into a law system with God according to the flesh. That's what the other thing he's trying to teach them here. So let's look at that, because that actually picks up from our manna account. So go to Exodus again. We were just in Exodus 15. Exodus 15. That's Exodus 14, that won't work. So he's going to now set up, he's going to explain to them how a law system works. So let's just look at this law system. He's healed the waters. Now he's going to look at verse 25. And he cried, this is Moses, cried unto the Lord, I am Jehovah. And we need water. And the Lord just said, well, showed him a tree. And when he cast it into the waters were made sweet. And he made for them a statute and an ordinance. And there he proved them. So it's just through the grace resident in his I am Jehovah name. Moses appealed to it. God gave him a tree, throw it in the water, and it healed the waters. Now he's going to prove them. He's going to test them. Now that should ring a bell, because what does Jesus in John 6 say he's doing with Philip and the other disciples? He's proving them. That's what he's going to do here with Israel. He's just put on this huge display of the grace resident in his I am Jehovah name, and now he's going to tell them how a law system works. Verse 26, and said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases upon you which I have put upon the Egyptians. So that's how a law system is going to work. He's explaining, if you do what I say, if you do my commandments, I will not curse you. Now, of course, what's the corollary of that? If you don't do my commands, I will curse you. Now, they're not under a law system at this time, and there's a good reason for that, and you'll see why in a minute. But he's going to prove them. He's going to test them. Are you going to try and relate to me on the basis of a law system, or are you going to continue and relate to me on the basis of a grace system through faith? Are you going to relate to me on a basis that depends on what you do, or are you going to relate to me on the basis of a system that is based on what I do? And that's really the question. And he ends it again with this I am, the one that just healed the waters so you can drink. I am the Lord that healeth thee. Which is it going to be? That's the important question. If they were under a law system during the Exodus, they would have received the curses. They would have received the diseases of Egypt. They would have been destroyed by them. Okay, so that sets the ground. That's the difference. That's law and grace. And now let's just see, he's going to demonstrate this again. He's going to prove it to them. So go to chapter 16, and let's just follow the chain down here. Chapter 16, verse 4. Then said the Lord unto Moses, behold, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. Now we get into our manna account. And people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day. So there's the command, and we're going to get more details as we go through. They're supposed to go out and follow God's commands about how to collect manna. And it's going to regard gathering at a certain rate every day, that I may, again, here we have it again, prove them, put them to the test. He's going to give them a little pop quiz. Are they going to rely on themselves, or are they going to rely on me? Have they learned that if they're going to be the people I created them to be, they have to just rely on me? And that's what he's going to prove them, whether they will walk in my law or not. And he's going to prove that they can't walk in the law. He's going to prove that they can't relate to him on the basis of a law system. Let's watch it unfold here. Go to verse 16. Verse 16, here's the first command. The first command, Exodus 16, verse 16. This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. Gather of it manna every day, every man according to his eating, an omer for every man, according to the number of your persons. Take ye every man for them which are in the tents. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered, some more, some less. And when they did measure it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing left over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. So it's a perfect provision. Every man had all that they needed for that day. So where does the part about faith come in? Reliance on God. They had to not hold anything over. They had to just rely that God would provide again manna tomorrow. And so he gives us command here. Here's the command, verse 19. And Moses said, let no man, no one, leave it until the morning. See, if you're relying on God to do it for them, they don't have to store some away in the storage closet in their house. Well, of course, they didn't have a house. In their tent or whatever they were living in, or out in the plain, whatever. They didn't need to store any for tomorrow, because they're supposed to be relying on the Lord. He'll provide it tomorrow. Notwithstanding, verse 20, they hearkened not unto Moses. But some of them left it until morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moses was angry with them, wroth, angry with them. So here we have the first test. Are you going to try to relate to me on the basis of a law system that depends on you doing the commands, my commands? Or are you going to rely on a grace system whereby I do everything? You rely on me to do everything for you. See, they should have just taken the manna, rejoiced in it, and through faith just waited for God to provide it the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So they failed the first test. He's showing them here they can't relate to him based on a law system. Go down to verse, that got us through verse 20, go down to verse 23. We have he's going to show it again. Verse 23. And he said unto them, this is that which the Lord hath said, tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which you will bake today. This is the manna. Seethe it, boil it, bake it, whatever you want to do with it. And that which remaineth over, lay up for you to eat the next morning. Now, 5 days they were supposed to well, really 6 days if you include the Sabbath, but let's not get that complicated right now. 5 days they were supposed to go, eat it all, and not carry anything over that night. The 6th day, though, they were supposed to go get it and reserve some overnight, because the next day was the Sabbath. And God wasn't going to provide manna on the Sabbath, and they weren't supposed to go out and look for it. But what happens? And they laid it up till the morning, so they followed that part, and Moses bade, and it stank not, neither was there any worm eaten. And Moses said, eat that today, for today is the Sabbath unto the Lord. Today you shall not find it in the field. They won't find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be no more. Don't go out on the Sabbath looking for manna, because there's not going to be any there. So what do? Verse 27, and it came to pass that there went out of the people on the 7th day to gather, and they found none. Now maybe that doesn't sound like much to us, but look at what God's response is. Verse 28, and the Lord said, Moses, how long refuse ye the people to keep my commandments and my laws? It was a big deal to God. He's trying to teach them that they must never ever relate to him on a basis of a system whereby it depends on what they do. They must relate to him only on the basis of a system of grace that is the relationships based on who he is and what he does. Here he gives them too little, and I like to put this all together because it's kind of funny, but maybe it makes the point. 2 eensy-weensy, teeny-tiny, easy-schmeasy little commands about collecting manna. And they can't even do that. The last thing they should do is get involved with a law system to relate to God based on a law system according to their power of their own flesh, them doing something. the law is going to culminate in, some say, 613 commandments. We read in Exodus 18, Moses is out there all day long, all morning, from sunrise to sunset, giving commands and laws. The thing they shouldn't have done at Sinai, what they should have learned through the Exodus, is don't go under a law system based on the power of their own flesh in their relationship with God. They can't even keep these two little commands. What are they going to do with God's whole Mosaic law system? Go to chapter 19. But of course, they answer wrongly at Sinai. And we'll just read this here, verse 8. Exodus 19, verse 8, and all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. Well, just a couple pages before this, God showed them they couldn't do even the simplest thing. So here they make the wrong choice. Most of traditional teaching of historic Christians are going to tell you they made the right choice here. It sounds so good to us. You know why it sounds good to us? Because we have a flesh just like the Israelites' flesh. We think we can make ourselves good enough for God. But he just explained in verses 5 and 6 that God's goal for the people is to make them into his great and holy nation. And they say, we'll do it ourselves. We'll do what you say to make ourselves into a great and holy nation. What should they have said? Lord, you showed us in the manna incident that we can't and must never do. We can't do what you demand to make us into your own great and holy nation. We can't do it. The job's too big. We can't do it. You have to do it for us. We couldn't even keep consistently two little eensy-weensy, teeny tiny, easy schmeezy little commands about collecting manna. There's no way we're going to be able to relate to you on the basis of the Mosaic law system. No way, Lord. You know what, Lord, you're going to have to do? You're going to have to put us back up on your eagle's wings and do what it says in verse 4. Carry on what you did throughout this whole Exodus. Flip back, go back to verse 4 of chapter 19. Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bear you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. That's what they needed to do. We can't do it, Lord. You prove that to us. We learned the only way we're going to be a great and holy nation is you do everything for us. You have to do it. You just put us back on your eagle's wings, and you have to keep flying us along and bring us to yourself. They flunk the test here in Exodus 19. They chose the last half of chapter 18, Moses being worn out and ruined under the law system, under giving the commands of the law. And that's what happened to the nation over the next 1,500 years. They were worn out and ruined. They were exiled from the land, kicked out of the land through the Babylonian and Assyrian captivities. Even the few that returned were still under Gentile rule. They created their own vain religious system. And that's where we are in the days of Jesus. So let's go back to John 6. That's where we are in John 6. They needed to fall on the grace resident in his I am Jehovah name. Now fast forward 1,500 years, and we know that 1,500 years of history it brought making that decision to go under that law system back in Exodus 19:8, war like it did Moses in Exodus 18. It wore out the nation and brought it to complete ruin. That's where we are in John 6 now in the earthly ministry of Christ. And now Jesus is going to tell Philip, let's go read here again. Let's go, I probably should have read one more verse. Pick it up at John 6, verse 5. John 6, verse 5. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, and prove all the disciples. You see, once we get to the next stage, when God gets through the next stage of his prophetic program with Israel, goes through that tribulation, Christ returns, calls together that believing remnant of Israel. You know what they're going to say at that time? They're going to give the right answer to the final exam in Exodus 18 and 19. And they're going to say, you can see this in Hosea 14:1 and Zechariah 12 and a whole bunch of places. At that time, they're going to give the right answer. They're going to say, no, Lord, you have to treat us graciously. You just have to put us back up on your eagle's wings, fly us along, bring us to yourself, and usher us into the kingdom, the promised land of the kingdom. And that's why here in John 6 now, all of a sudden we've had the I am Jehovah name before this with the Samaritan woman, but now in John 6 we're going to have at least four, kind of depending on how you count them, occurrences of this I am Jehovah name. When they go through the second Exodus, under the greater prophet like unto Moses, the Lord Jesus Christ, who's going to lead them through a second greater Exodus, they are going to answer the question right. Lord, you have to treat us graciously. They're going to take hold of his I am name. He's testing the disciples. We just read here in verse 6. And now our first I am name, remember they go out in the boat and they're going to be in turbulent water. Verse 20, we're not going to get into this whole account right now, but I just want to go through these I am names. But he said unto them, it is I in our King James, that's really that ego eimi, I am. Now, in English, you usually, 99.999% of the time, in order to have good grammar and good sentence structure, you have to fill it, to have a complete sentence, you need to add something to the end. But you see, this is the exception that proves the rule. In this case, you don't want to do what the King James did here, you just want to leave it I am. Because the whole idea, the disciples needed to fill in whatever they needed him to be. This it is I am. That's his I am Jehovah name. That points back to Isaiah 43. That has the Lord telling them, I am with thee. It is I am with you. Jehovah in Exodus 3 verses 14 and 15. I am equals Jehovah, the Lord. So it starts out with I am. He's just going to give them his I am name here. Then he's going to go on and he's going to show them how to fill it in, just like back at the Exodus. He gives them the I am name in chapter 3, and they go through this Exodus, and he's going to show them, I am your healer. I am your banner. I am your conquering hero. He's all these things. He's their provider. He's everything they need. He begins here in chapter 6 with I am in verse 20. He's going to take that now and he's going to say, let me give you an example of how to fill it in. And he's in verse 35. He says, and Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. And then the people are going to quote him as saying, I am the bread that came down from heaven. And then Jesus himself says in verse 51, I am the living bread which came down from heaven. And if any man eat of me. So like the Israelites at the first Exodus, they just needed to stand still and wait for the Lord to work his redemption, deliverance, avengement. The first three mandates of that Davidic covenant, what in John we always think of when we hear verily, verily. We've talked about that many times, especially in John 3. And that's what they needed to learn. They're going to be the nation he's designed them to be. They have to rely on him to do everything for them. They need to make use of his I am Jehovah name, where the grace for Israel resides, access that in faith, and he will put them on his wings and carry them into that kingdom. Let's look at Exodus 14 and just see an example of this. Let's go back to Exodus. Exodus 14. Let's see another example of this. He doesn't use the I am terminology here, the Jehovah terminology, however. So let's go to Exodus 14. Remember, they're leaving the nation. We actually read a little this not too far away from here earlier, but now let's go to verse, what verse do I want here? Verse 13. So they are going to leave Egypt quickly here. They're gone outside of Goshen. Behind them are the horses and chariots of the Egyptian army galloping and screeching toward them. And if they go forward, they're going to drown in the Red Sea. There's no hope for them. They can't do anything themselves. So this is what the Lord keeps doing. He keeps putting them in impossible situations so that they just rely on Him. He'll do what needs to be done to make them into His own great and holy nation. They just need to rely on Him. And He's going to bring that out now in verse 13. Exodus 14:13. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still. Stop doing anything, and see the salvation of the Lord. Notice that's all caps. In Exodus 3, the I am is equivalent to the all caps Lord, Jehovah, which He will show you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. And look what it says here. The Lord I am shall fight for you, and what they needed to realize is they needed to rely on the Lord for everything. The Lord was going to fight for them. I am your conquering hero, your banner, He's going to say later when He's battling the Amalek's army. Their part was to hold their peace. Keep reading. And verse 15, and the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou to me this day? Speak to the children of Israel, that I go forward, but lift up thy rod. And we're going to stop there because we can't go into any more details. But remember where the rod comes in? Exodus 4, with the giving of the signs. It's the rod, so that they might believe that Moses is sent of God. And Moses just holds up the rod of God of faith. And what happens? They're standing still, holding their peace, watching God deliver them, and the waters part. And they go through dry shod. The waters flow back and swallow up the Egyptian army. That's the only way they're going to be made into God's people. They can't do it themselves. They can't do it themselves. If they were under the law system in that wilderness wanderings and they broke God's commands at the manna, collecting of the manna, God would have put the curse or the diseases of Egypt on them. That's what they were supposed to learn. They can't do it themselves. They can't relate to God based on a law system according to the flesh, that through the power of their own flesh. They have to rely on Him to do everything for them. And here Jesus is going to bring this out, the bread of life. They didn't really need the physical bread He was given. They could have gone back home. They might have been pretty hungry, but no one would have keeled over dead on the way of starvation. They need Him, though. And He's trying to show them that as He's going to do this miraculous sign. The sign is different than others. I kind of talked about this. A lot of the other miraculous signs are with people in much more dire circumstances where death has manifested itself, whether it be the healings where death has entered into aspects of their body or their lives, whether, of course, raising from the dead like Lazarus, casting out devils, all these things. These people were in dire circumstances. Here, it's a little different kind of miracle than that. Here, it's people may have been hungry, but none of them were excessively starving or anything like that. They didn't really primarily need the physical food. They really and primarily needed Him. He was the one who could usher them into the superabundance of the kingdom, who would provide a table for them in the wilderness, especially during that tribulation period. Because remember, at this point in John, there's only what's left on Daniel's time schedule is that 7-year tribulation period. and they needed this instruction for that. That's what this is all going to be building up to. And here we have something kind of not so much like most of the miraculous signs he did for people who are in dire circumstances, but in more like the first miracle of Cana with the changing of the water into wine. Did I say that right? The water into wine. The superabundance, remember, it filled all those baptismal water jugs. And here you have, he's going to super abundantly fill. There's 5,000 men here, so 10,000 with the women, and then even if there's another 5,000, 5 to 10,000 children, 15, 20,000 people out of 5 loaves of barley bread and 2 fish. And there's going to be 12 baskets, huge baskets left over from that. And we'll look at that in more detail as we go through there. Now I just want to close by looking at some other Exodus themes or aspects of the Exodus that come through here that at least stick out to me that are reminiscent of the Exodus. So let's take a look at some of these. First of all, and these are just kind of, now I'm just kind of putting together some final little stray reminiscences, I guess. We don't have much time left here. But like the Israelites of old, the crossings of the Sea of Galilee are also reminiscent of the Exodus account. So let's just look at that. Let's go, these aren't all in this section. This has more to do with the book of John, or excuse me, this chapter in John. But notice in chapter 6, verse 1, after these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is in Tiberias. So I don't know, maybe we should go to our map, since I got it here, I think. There we go. So remember, John 5, Jesus is down in Jerusalem, comes up to here. Capernaum is kind of his home base, and he crosses the Red Sea. This is reminiscent of the crossing of the Red Sea, but he crosses the Sea of Galilee and goes over into his Galanitis, or however you pronounce that area, a primarily Jewish area. And he's going to go up into one of the mountains here, and he's going to feed the 5,000. Now, all I'm bringing out in this point is he crosses the sea. Remember, there was a crossing of the sea at the first Exodus. He's going to come back and cross it again and go to Capernaum. He recrosses the sea, and it's going to be a turbulent sea, and he's going to invite them on the other side to receive supernaturally supplied spiritual food, receive himself. The manna, the true manna that came down from heaven. And this feeding of the 5,000, like the changing of the water to the wine, the healing of the nobleman's son, all these things, they manifest the glory of God, put on display. God is there. God is with them. Remember, Emmanuel, God with you. Jesus, Jehovah, your Savior, is with you. He's present. And these signs put that on display, and they point to God being with them in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so let's look at close with just a couple other reminiscences here. I got to use a different word because I can't get that one all out. Let's look at the next one. Jesus, like the Israelites of old, Jesus tests Philip and really the other disciples to teach them the need of relying on the grace resident in his I am Jehovah name. Just as he tried to teach the Israelites that we saw in the first part of the message tonight at the first Exodus. What he's trying to teach them is that circumstances don't matter when you have the Lord on your side. Now you see, here's another one of those. You can't make this work today. Don't try this today. That God isn't picking sides today with nations and wars or anything like that. And it won't work today. Today, God's not dealing on a national level. And so it won't work today. But it did because Israel is his own nation. And he would provide that for them, and circumstances don't matter. Remember the spies, we won't turn here, But the spies in Numbers 13 and 14, well, let's go there, because this really displays what he's trying to get across here. Numbers 13, I didn't even include the verses there, so hopefully I can find them pretty quickly. Yeah, here we go. Let's go to chapter 14 and just read this. Remember, they send the spies in. They go look in the land. 12 spies. 10 of them said, "No, don't go in there. The enemy is too great. The land isn't that great. You know, we don't go in there. It's too scary." And then you had 2 that said, "Yes, go in. Don't worry about the giants," as Joshua and Caleb. Don't worry about the giants. It'll be a problem for us, but good thing we don't have to do it. The Lord's going to do it for us. The Lord, the giants may be a problem for us, but they're not a problem for the Lord. And he tells them to go in. And look let's just pick it up at verse 6. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes, and they spoke unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to search it is exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord. Don't reject the grace resident as I am Jehovah name. Rely on it. And neither fear the people of the land, for they are bread to us. Have we been talking about bread in John 6? He's going to talk about eating some bread there. Here we have another metaphor. Israel will just eat up the enemy like bread. Why? And the Lord, because the Lord, verse 9, is with us. Fear not. See, what he needed to get them to realize, especially now, the next thing is this tribulation period, especially the last 3.5 years of that tribulation period, circumstances don't matter with the Lord. He's more powerful than any others. And since they're going to appeal to him on the basis of a grace system, he'll do everything for them. If they had learned what Jesus said in John 5, that we spent quite a bit of time on, they would have no problem understanding and passing the test. They would have no problem whatsoever. They'd know who he is, and they'd rely on him through faith. All right. So let's go and look at one final thing here, and I think I'll make it through my notes tonight. Where will we buy bread? Here Jesus kind of picks up on something that's reminiscent, again, from the Exodus account. This will be the final one we look at. Exodus, Numbers, let's read it in John 6 first, so you see where I'm getting this. John 6, verse 5. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? Now that is very reminiscent of the Israelites in the wilderness journey. So let's go look at that. Numbers. Go back to Numbers. Probably should have had just keep your fingers there. But Numbers 11 this time. Numbers 11, verse 12. Numbers 11, verse 12. And so this is Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. The people are complaining, and there's problems in the camp. We can't go into all that now. But then let's just pick it up at verse 12. At verse 12. Well, I guess verse 11. And Moses, verse 11, and Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? See, Moses is going to start complaining now because the burden of Israel is too great for him. Guess what Israel under the law is doing? It's wearing out Moses and the people already, and that they've only been under it for a little while. And Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant, and wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest this burden of all these people on me? Have I conceived all these people? Have I begotten them? That thou shouldst say unto me, Carry them in thy bosom as a nursing father beareth a sucking child unto the land which thou swearest unto their fathers. Verse 13. Whence should I have, and listen to what he says here, whence should I have flesh to give all these people Does that sound a little bit like Jesus in John 6:5? Where shall we get bread to feed all these people? Moses is saying the same thing. Now, it's not the same way Jesus was saying it. He's doing it complaining, but it's the same question here. The people, and they've even worn down Moses to be a complainer. Where will we get the bread to feed all these people? What was too much for Moses will not be too much for the greater prophet like unto Moses, the Lord Jesus Christ. He can not only provide them with the physical bread for physical life, that what Moses did was provide physical bread for physical life, and even that didn't work. They all died in the wilderness except for Joshua and Caleb. The Lord can supply not only the physical bread the nation's going to need, he can supply the spiritual bread that they're going to need. And so that's where we'll go ahead and close. If they wanted to have, and what the people of Israel needed to understand, this multitude following Jesus Christ back and forth, the crossing of the sea, what they needed to realize is if they wanted a permanent supply of physical bread, the only way they could secure that is through being related and receiving the spiritual bread of the Lord Jesus Christ, receiving the Lord Jesus Christ himself. And then that would take care of everything else. All right, on that note, we'll go ahead and close with a word of prayer.